Most people think India is not a big enough market. Indians don't pay for software, but Indians are already paying $20 billion year on year for software. India is now home to about 150,000 startups, and these startups are born digital, and they are probably already using software on par with their global counterpart.
The work from home trend that happened. So suddenly, a whole economy of 2 to 3 trillion had to figure out how to survive remotely. And that almost forced them into a situation that, look, guys, go figure out. But you have to do things digitally.
A very telling finding, which, by the way, tallied with my instincts with what Amar was talking about with the report, right, is that 80% of software bought in India is actually from global majors. And it always surprises me that foreign entrepreneurs realize what we don't, what we refuse to, right? Imagine we sending 25, 28, 30-year-old, 35-year-olds who've never been to America, sending them to America. They're renting a place in some, corner of Bay Area, paying themselves crazy money, pulling and pushing for an O1 without any network, right? And foreign companies are saying, you know what, a great way to grow for us is to go to India, right? I can count on, I can count the number of companies who've gone outside India and achieved 50 million ARR, right? But actually, the number of companies that have gone outside India to America and have achieved 50 million ARR is actually smaller than American companies who've come to India and have done more than 50 million ARR. 10 years ago, it was very hard to find people who could sell software and who could go to market, who could market and so on and so forth. Not anymore, right? We have massive alumni, right, of people who work and who've scaled software, who can sell software, right? India has also 3 cities, right? All the software sold is in 3 cities, right? Bangalore, Bombay, and Delhi. If you have representation in 3 cities, right, and if you can afford cab fare in 3 cities, you can essentially target almost all of this 20 billion in purchases, right? The Indian market advantage is a ladder to SaaS success. You can be more efficient. You have more chances to fail. And anybody who thinks they're going to build their software in the first shot, right? Look, I know you can't see my gray hair from here, but trust me, there are plenty there.
See, one thing which we've not really done as a country is to celebrate some of these companies who built for the India market, scaled itself in this market, and then moved to other markets. We've also evangelized this sell to India GTM playbook itself. We've not done too many of them, but there are enough playbooks out there which we have to make it available for other founders itself.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today. We've got a phenomenal panel and we're going to be diving into the report Beyond the Valley, a report by SaaSBoomi and One Lattice, where we talk about the very exciting India domestic opportunity. Super quickly, I will just introduce who we have here today. We have Kuldeep, who's obviously a friend of Antler and the co-founder of Last9, and one of the most persuasive voices on why India SaaS is just getting started. Gowri from the Antler team, who leads our SaaS, AI, and deep tech investments. And joining in is Amar, who's the CEO of One Lattice and helped co-author this report. And of course, Avinash, who's the co-founder of SaaSBoomi and someone who's been a force behind the growth of the India SaaS ecosystem. So super excited to dive into this. We'll start with Gowri, who will walk us through some key highlights from the report, setting a stage for the discussion. And after that, we'll sort of go to the panel. If you folks have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, and then I'll help pick it for the panel. And yeah, over to you, Gowri.
Thank you. Thank you, Neha. And super excited to be part of this fantastic panel. I was just looking through the Luma registrations of people who have signed up for this session. Roughly 50% of the founders who have registered for this are already building for the India market. So my thing to you is congratulations. You made the right choice. The remaining 50% who are not yet building for the India market, hopefully in the next 45 to 60 minutes, we can make a strong case so that you challenge your decision and think about building for the India market. So without that, I think the primary agenda for today is to unpack the $100 billion untapped opportunity in the domestic software market. right? This came out of the report that SaaSBoomi and One Lattice spearheaded over the last few weeks, right? And Kuldeep and I were part of this report as well. So over the next 10 minutes, I would like to walk you through 4 or 5 key highlights that came out of this report. And post that, we will go around the panel and get their perspective on this as well. Right. Quickly sharing my screen, hoping all of you are able to see the screen.
Yep.
So, I think this might be news for many folks, right? India's software market is already a $20 billion market in 2025. Right? That's a big message, number one, right? Most people think India is not a big enough market. Indians don't pay for software, but Indians are already paying $20 billion year on year for software. Right? And this is a 7x growth over the last 10 years. In 2015, Indian enterprises spent about $3 billion in software. In 2025, it's about $20 billion. Right? And driven by multiple factors, I think many of this you might already be aware of. Surge in mobile internet adoption, the second largest mobile internet user base in India. There's a strong digital public infrastructure, right? The entire UPI, the ONDC, the India stack that has been built over the last few years, enabling interoperability between businesses and driving adoption of software. Formalization of the Indian economy. I think what's happening is post GST and post COVID, more and more businesses want to adopt technology because the regulatory and compliance reasons. The whole formalization of the Indian economy is a third biggest driver. The large enterprises are now using technology as a way to transform their businesses, right? Both on the revenue front and on the cost front. Many enterprises have started investing in technology over the last few years. And last but not the least, probably the most important one, is India is now home to about 150,000 startups. And these startups are born digital, and they are probably already using software on par with their global counterpart, giving the much needed push for the domestic software market. Another macro point supporting this, even at a GDP level, the IT spend as a percentage of GDP in India is now getting closer and closer to the global average, which is 4.9%. We are at 4.4%. But we still have a lot of headroom on software, right? We have caught up over the last 5 to 10 years on the hardware investment and use of communication services, right? But we still have a little bit of headroom to cover in the software front. Again, like I mentioned, the two biggest spenders within this $20 billion bucket is number one, digital natives and tech for the businesses. And here I'm putting IT services, GCCs, and digital natives together spend about $7.5 billion, right? And then this next biggest bucket is BFSI, right, which is about $4.3 billion. And if you look at from a type of business and the type of solution, type of software that Indians are buying, horizontal solutions lead in adoption. I think ERB and CRM are the top contributors, right? From a type of business point of view, large enterprises still control 80% of software spend in India, right? There's a massive headroom that's available in mid-market and small and medium businesses. And third big message is a large portion of software that's bought in India is still on-prem, right? 70% of businesses still have some part of their workload running on-premise as opposed to cloud, and that's also an opportunity over the next 10 years. Right? Now, quickly segueing into the next 10 years, and what are some of the paid demand and supply tailwinds from domestic software adoption? Right? On the demand side, I think we are seeing more and more India-native requirements, right? From GST invoice to regulatory compliance requirements for India means that software built in India is much better suited for this, right? Second, I think AI is bringing down the cost of software development so significantly that it now almost becomes no-brainer for Indian businesses to use software. Right? Earlier, the cost of software could have been a prohibiting factor in terms of them adopting software. But now, with AI coming, the cost is coming down. There's no reason why they should not shift. And third, post-COVID, there has been a decisive shift to cloud. This we expect to continue over the next 10 years. And hopefully by 2035, 90% of all Indian workloads will likely be on cloud. The fourth big driver on the demand side is going to be SMB digital transformation. Right? SMBs have just started seeing the benefits of technology, and the primary area where they've seen this is payment. But now with that benefit realized, they will start looking at adopting technology in other aspects of the business, which will drive growth. Startups will continue to be a big driver. I mean, there are reports that are saying the 150,000 number of startups that we have will likely be 1 million startups in India by 2035, which will again create a significant demand for software in India. The last two drivers, government continues to look at digitization of citizen services, right? Digital public infrastructure will continue, which will be a positive demand driver. And last but not the least, the need for security and compliance, right, will also drive the demand for software. From a supply side, I think there are a few positive things that have happened in the last 5-6 years, which will carry forward in the next 10 years. Number one, I think the number of domestic success stories. We now have 8 to 10 very large software companies built for India, from India, right? Take the example of Razorpay, take the example of Perseus, take the example of Darwin Box, right? Many of these success stories are driving more founders to look at the domestic software market as an opportunity. Second, investor confidence, right? More VCs are setting up and taking notice about the spend that is happening in India and how they can back startups that capture this spend. Third, I think we continue to be the home of the second largest developer pool in the world, and it's only a matter of time as a portion of this developer pool starts focusing on the Indian market as well. And the last one is a nuanced point, but an important one, which is the Indian startups are actually making sure the quality benchmarks of the software that is getting built in India is on par with global. So earlier, enterprises would say, hey, you won't get fired for buying an Adobe or Oracle or SAP. Now the Indian software quality is getting on par, right? Making it easier for domestic businesses to buy domestic software, right? So the big news, the second big message from this session is that domestic software market has a potential to scale to $100 billion by 2035, right? And this is a 5x growth from the current number, right? And at this stage, India will probably spend 1.5% of the GDP on software to drive productivity. India will be a $7.5 to $8 trillion economy, and about 1.4% will be spent on software. Just to put things in perspective, right? Let's see how it compares to some of the global benchmarks, right? US in 1995 allocated about $80 billion into software, right? And US was at 7.6 trillion GDP in 1995, right? And believe me, this is in an era which is pre-internet, pre-mobile, pre-cloud, pre-AI, right? India has all of these factors at play, right? And there is no reason why Indian domestic software spend cannot be more than $100 billion in 2025, right? We have multiple strong tailwinds, and this is an opportunity waiting to be tapped by founders. What are the 5 big areas where this spend is likely to happen? Number one, enterprise AI and cloud adoption. That's likely to be a $35 billion market. The second big area of focus, digital natives. This is both your startups as well as GCCs and IT services companies, likely to be a $25 billion plus market. Third, SMBs, right? Usage of voice, vernacular, and vertical to drive SMB transformation, right? That's likely to be a $10 billion plus market. Government will continue to spend on digitization. That's likely to be an $8 billion market. And security and compliance for India is likely to be a $10 billion market. 5 major opportunities. If you're a founder building for India, these are the 5 areas to start your research on. Right? That's it. Building for India is definitely different from building for the world. Right? India is not for the faint-hearted. Right? And building in India needs a slightly different playbook compared to building for the world. Right? And what are the salient elements of building for India? First one, I think if you are a founder building for India, try to attach yourself to an India-native use case. Right? There are many successful examples. You've seen how Paytm innovated the Soundbox, which got adopted by millions of businesses in India, right? Or you've seen ClearTax building a GST filing software, which is very, very unique to the Indian market. The second one, Indian enterprise software buyers are very, very value conscious. right? So you almost need to engineer product for extreme value, right? What does that mean? Look at where does the ROI come and work back the cost of your software from the ROI. And second, think about how you can crunch the time to value. Right? This is very, very value conscious customers. You almost need to have a services component that makes sure that the customer adopts the platform and derive the value. Third, compared to the global market where triability of software is quite high, India is high on referenceability as opposed to triability. What does that mean? I mean, if you're building for the US, you probably have a senior engineering manager who can swipe a car and buy a $200, $300 software. That doesn't happen in India, right? Decision making is still hierarchical. So you need to invest in high-tech GTM. Even if you're building for small and medium businesses, right? PRG does not work. You need to think about product assisted growth and a growth with the high-touch human conversations. Fourth, because of this high-tech GTM and the cost of acquiring a customer being quite high, and the maturity of the buyer not being on par with global, you almost need to go multi-product sooner, taking care of your customer's needs across multiple aspects. And the last one is going after Indosphere, which is Middle East, North Africa, and Southeast Asia, creates an instant time and margin unlock if you're a founder, right? So once you have got the core product worked out in India, you can unlock more time and unlock more margins by expanding into Indosphere. These are 5 salient elements. I think we'll get more examples, details of it as we go deeper into the panel. 3 broad archetypes. We have seen global titans succeed in India. I don't know if many people know there are multi-billion-dollar domestic revenue companies among global titans. Salesforce is already a billion-dollar revenue in India, right? And we also had domestic diehards, so been building businesses for the long haul and gotten to scale right now. Zoho probably doing $200 million plus from Asia Pacific, right? You have Tally, which is probably around $100 million business. And third, now there's a new category of founders that are coming, VC-backed disruptors, right, who are now building high-quality software for India, right? Because if you look at the India market, customers only had 2 options. Either you go after these overpriced, over-engineered global software, or you had like a local services vendor who's probably producing a substandard quality software. There is a world space for founders, right, which is building high quality, better UX software for India and capturing the market. And we're seeing some early examples in terms of the VC-bound disruptors. Right? What's the final big message, right? What does $100 billion market mean, right? So today, only 25% of this $100 billion market is catered by domestic software companies built by founders from India, right? 75% of the market is with global titans, right? But when you look at the next 10 years, there is an opportunity for domestic software companies to capture at least 50% of this market. And what does that mean? That means putting up a very tough competition in the large enterprises where the global titans are already incumbents. But the big white space that you have in the medium enterprises and SMB, I think domestic founders can go after and aim to capture at least 70 to 80% share of this, right? So, and if we do that, there is a real opportunity to build another 60 to 70 unicorns building software for the domestic market. Right? Now, if you're a founder, I think the way you should think about it, cost of product development has come down significantly. Right? So the arbitrage of building in US and India is no longer there. Right? So if you are going to fight in the US market, you need to really have a distribution right to win. Whereas this is a home market, which is equally big, $100 billion opportunity. You know the market, you can build here, and you can also understand the customers here a lot more deeply. So how do you take the home ground advantage and win in this space and get to build another 50 to 60 software gems? Right? So that is a massive opportunity, and it's available for founders to capture. Again, this is not going to happen easily. There are a bunch of imperatives, both in terms of government, in terms of industry platforms, as well as investor community and the ecosystem all coming together to help realize the potential. The report also talks about some of the specific initiatives that can happen around this. But that's broadly what is there to unpack in the report. Just to summarize, 5 key messages. 1, We already $20 billion domestic market, but led by global players who capture 75% of the share. In the next 10 years, this is likely to grow 5x or more, 100 billion plus opportunity to be unlocked by 2035. 5 major opportunity areas for founders. We spoke about enterprise AI, assembly digital transformation, startups, government digitization, cybersecurity and compliance. And 5 salient elements of playbook for winning in India based on many startups that we have looked at. And opportunity to build 50 plus unicorns in the domestic market. So that's broadly what is there in the report. Many thanks to SaaSBoomi, One Lattice, and a bunch of contributors, 50 plus contributors who had given both their time and insights generously to make this happen. With that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and open this up for the panel discussion. So we will go around the table. First, Amar. Amar, I think in the process of putting this report together, you have spoken to maybe 25 to 30 CXO CEOs, and you also spoken to 20 other people from the investor community, right?
Right.
Can you share one or two eye-opening insights that made you stop and say, hey, well, India is going to be really huge, right? Were there such aha moments that you experienced during this interview? And what is driving your and One Lattice team conviction that this 100 billion opportunity is real?
Right. I hope I'm audible and clear. Yeah. All right. So it's interesting that you asked that, Gowri, and I would want to, as I try to answer that, put that in 2 buckets. See, one is it's difficult to figure out and tell you 5 or 10 such anecdotes because there were so many, and each of them having different flavors, different colors, which are coming from their own experiences. So one, when you hear a lot of drivers, it tells you something is cooking here. I mean, it just too many things. So from healthcare experts giving very specific inputs into what's changing there, to of course BFSI talking about, and within BFSI, if you're talking to banks, they're telling you something. If you're talking to fintechs, they're telling you something. If you're talking to retail, there's just so much happening there. If you're talking to e-commerce, I mean, that's, like you said, digital natives, and what's happening there is all completely been based on the digital transformation. So that's one aspect. The second is yet the uniformity in what they are talking about in terms of why it is happening, how it is happening. So that was to me the 2 faces of my observations. Let me go a little bit deeper into that. Especially, when you draft a report and when you've heard 50 people and also you do secondary research and of course AI-led research these days, you come across so many themes. So we are only able to capture the 5 big themes, let's say. But then there are so many more. So let me cover these 2 aspects. So first, let me talk about the Uber themes. And you've covered that in summary very well. So rather than, repeat those, the first big eye-opening moment, or rather in terms of drivers of why this change has happened, because that's the precursor to what can possibly happen, was the COVID-19 discontinuity. Now, while, we look at it as, okay, maybe, e-commerce increased, maybe, food delivery and other stuff increased and restaurants shifted. What really happened here was trends like, organizations migrating to cloud. That was one very, very big driver of COVID-19. The second was, let's say, the work from home trend that happened. So suddenly a whole economy of 2 to 3 trillion had to figure out how to survive remotely. And that almost forced them into a situation that, look, guys, go figure out, but you have to do things digitally. Now you may be, a Biggie, you may be a Reliance, you may be a Tata, you may be a Mahindra. And, let's say some of the traditional large enterprises, which were relatively more comfortable, are doing a slow shift to digitization. Suddenly that massive shift to digitization happened. Now I can add more color to this in terms of details. Let's say, e-commerce and retail, we probably all understand. They were handling large volumes of data. There were huge deliveries. So that to figure out, how to maintain customer satisfaction, business continuity, they figured. Now look at, let's say, financial institutions. They also accelerated their cloud adoption. They had to support remote operations. I was myself at that time running a home loan business at Magic Breaks, and we were figure out how would homes sell remotely. And then, sort of necessity is the mother of invention. So people figured out how homes will sell. Then people figured out, let's say, how the agents, the feet on street will do it online. And then new apps, we ourselves build new apps, new solutions. Somebody use simple apps like WhatsApp, and then Slack or whatever other team discussion mechanisms. Then if you look at something more specific like healthcare, teleconsultations became a reality. That was probably not, people would not go to it unless they needed to, but once they experienced it, they realized. And there was huge shift from even post COVID. There is that stickiness that prevailed, that people who had experienced that level of teleconsultation, home services and healthcare, they stuck to it. They found it more convenient. Convenient it always was, but probably there was not conviction that the same quality of services could be delivered while remote. And once that experience happened, and it's also demand side and supply side. Supply side came up to meet that gap. And therefore, viable solutions happened across different industries, big and small. And here, first, I'm talking about the big trends. Now, then there are many, many smaller trends, in fact. I would not even call them small, but in relation to, let's say, COVID-19 discontinuity, the big thing is the digital public infrastructure that happened in India, which on one hand facilitated digitization, on the other hand, it necessitated digitization. Because unless you are digital, you cannot be compliant. Something as simple as, and Kuldeep, we were talking about it yesterday. I mean, simply fact that you need a GST compliant bill. And, unless you are digitized, you can't really move there. So then this formalization of Indian economy, this was the one big moment for me. The second big moment or the theme was AI. And we cannot escape it. The fact is that everyone spoke about it and everyone spoke about so many different use cases of AI that on one hand, it's an Uber theme, but on the other hand, there are probably 50 or 100 opportunities within AI by industry for large enterprises, for SMBs that, you can just go after each of these. You were showing those 5 big opportunities. The smallest amongst them, let's say a government or a cyber security is 8 to 10 billion. And it's still so large that, if you were to make a solution for that and have a good market share in that, you're still $1 billion company, maybe a few $100 million top line, right? So if you see from government, which has allocated more than 10,000 crore to India AI mission, the fact, and actually some of these were facts that I found during authoring this report, India is actually the second largest installed AI workforce of, 400,000 plus employees. In terms of AI skill level and skill penetration rate, India is actually the leader globally. And some of these, what was in the 90s, sort of a, I would not call it digitization, but at least, let's say, technology adoption has now increased to the level that even on AI, India is setting up the global benchmarks. Now, talking about use cases, of course, I can go on and on about how retail and e-commerce and, BFSI are using it. But let's say areas like agriculture, in precision farming, in yield prediction, in price discovery. Now, each of these is creating multiple opportunities in agri-tech with AI that is, of course, going to be digitally led. Because agriculture for us was always about farming and it was about, protecting farmers. And then at some point it became about yield and, tools and techniques to improve productivity. No, now it's not about that. It's actually even more than that. It's about solving the inefficiencies in the supply chain ecosystem about agriculture. And if you solve for that, the true potential of agriculture becomes, a lot more. So these, I would say, were the two biggest for me. The COVID-19 discontinuity, which was combined with this lead of digital public infrastructure and formalization of Indian economy. The second was the shift to AI. And I would say there are, other themes that we probably did not cover so much in depth in the report, but I would want to bring those to mention here. Consumerization of software. The fact that you mentioned it in the beginning when you were opening, the fact that people made software easy. The fact that, let's say, the leaders of India SaaS, let's say a Freshworks or a Zoho, they actually created software which was similar to in use to Gmail. And we are talking about a B2B application here. Then there are newer entrants, let's say like a Keka, Zomentum, etc. They are building mobile first collaborative features. They are almost like Slack. So talk about enterprising software being so simple that it is being used even by the field force, the very, let's say, the Swiggies and the Zomatos, which are creating such basic applications that can be used by the lowest income strata of this country, right? So it's not just the B2C app, the consumerization of software which has happened in the B2B side. Then there's something on the low code, no code front. The fact that it enabled non-technical businesses to adopt technology and to build software. And then there is quantum computing and a few other things. Now, each of these may not be labeled as the big five, but each of these is a unique and valuable trend that we'll see unfolding more and more.
Oh, thanks, Amar. I think that's phenomenal. I also resonate a lot with the whole formalization of economy thing. I was talking to a founder of a manufacturing-based ERP, and he was just mentioning why, even though GST went live in 2017 timeframe, the real impact on the ground started in 2020 when people understood what is the impact of this, and suddenly even small factory started looking for software. Right, is in his 15-year founder journey, that 3 years is where he saw maximum traction. So I can't agree more with you. With that, I quickly segue into Kuldeep. Kuldeep, you have built and scaled businesses in India over 2 decades now, right? What in your view is uniquely challenging and rewarding about building for the India market, right? And if what would be your top lessons for founders who are looking to build for the domestic software market?
Right. 2 decades. Well, I started very young, just so you know. So I'm not that old. I must mention that. Look, again, my job description per se is to really generate value, right? And startups by definitions are improbable. But what I saw early on, right, and I was lucky enough to, be alive during some of the, have a career under, some of the most dynamic prime ministers we've had, right? Like there was this whole mission about, like the early 2000s were a very, very weird, confusing times for India, right? Things were just growing and blowing up for a long time. I know it doesn't feel like that, but we over these last 2 decades, right? But I've sold software, built and scaled software companies all my life. And here is what I would say, right? An economy cannot grow without software because software is basically an abstraction of effort in people, right? Tally has been around for a long time, and Tally is actually in many ways a great company and a missed opportunity, however you may want to call it. But it's still a business that has kind of sustained through 30 years, right? They found prosumers. It's the first prosumer SaaS. I mean, a software, you may call it, they're really not really a SaaS, even though they tried. There is a narrative, when you think about SaaS in India, right, there's this whole thing, right, that you build for the world. And I actually attribute that to that coming into this new century, right, there was really only 3 big ways to make a massive company in India, right? The 3 big profit pools really were you lend money, right? You export something, or you get a license from the government, right? And if you were around in the 90s and the early 2000s, outside of these, there was no way, right? These were the only big profit pools, which is why, you look at our banking sector, massive, right? You look at some for banking and, lending as a feature, that's where that is, right? The other one is get a license from the government. Well, that's a little bit more difficult, but, some of our auto manufacturers and the new space tech and so on and so forth, that hasn't really gone away, but in the early 90s, that started to disappear, right? But export, again, remains a big profit pool. I know the tariffs and export are the topic of the hour, right? But what everybody forgets is India has massive software exports, which, by the way, Trump forgot to account in his trade balance, right? Now, thank God for us, very bad for Europe, right? Europe, for example, imports $500 billion of software from America every year, right? So it's one of those things. America actually gets a lot more money in by selling software to the world and so on and so forth. America is also the largest software market, also the largest software producer market in the world, right? Extremely competitive. So whenever I've built software, right, the general narrative has been, build in India, sell to the world, right? And when people say world, they mostly mean America, right? People will say, well, they mostly mean America, because really it is the only other software market that is cogent and geographically homogeneous, right? Otherwise, if you have tried selling in Europe, and the PTSD you get from that will make sure you never go there again. It's possible, just not early enough, right? Southeast Asia is a very interesting market. So my core playbook really has been very straightforward, right? So, you talked about, how to build India-specific software company. But I see a lot of Indian SaaS companies. Recently somebody tweeted about 23 big companies who are above some 50 million ARR and whatnot, right? And I realized that most of the companies are actually not Indian companies, they're American companies, right? Indian founder, right? But companies are being built and sold. And, most Indian companies are Delaware C Corps. They're effectively American companies. They go public in America. SaaS has had a playbook where, you raise money, in 2 years you find, you build the product, in 1 year you get to 1 million, then you raise a Series A, and then you get to 5 million, you raise a Series B, and then, off to the races you go, right? 90% of those companies are dead before they ever get to 1 million ARR, right? We all know this, right? Because 3 years of building a SaaS company is extremely difficult. I have actually been rather discouraged by the high mortality of high quality software companies. Now, in India, it's surprisingly cheap and quick to put a high quality software team together, a team that can build a software, right? I'm not a big believer of India-native use cases, because India uses software the same way as the world does, right? Which is the most highest selling premium phone in the world? It's the Apple iPhone, right? We use Android, right? If you look at India A buys the same product as the world buys, and at the same prices, right? Actually, we pay more for our iPhones than Americans do, right? Everybody who's visited America knows this, right? So, the rich part of India is actually rather rich, right? And here's the thing, right? India has a lot of productivity being driven. Most of that's through software. So, when you look at 7x of the last 10 years, right? I mean, this is not surprising to me, because we've seen businesses that have sold to India, right? I mean, we were at SaaSBoomi, we had Avinash, who I think is a great example, right? In years building software is, hopefully, we should start seeing the first few SaaS IPOs in India, right? And that'll happen because India is also one of the most attractive markets to IPO a software company, right? Yeah. America, you try to file with less than 250 million revenue and growing fast, you won't be able to IPO today, right? Median software multiples are 4x, 5x in America today, right? Not very attractive. And by the way, they're not going to improve very soon. And the reasons are very obvious, as I'll talk about it. But here's the thing, right? India is one of the fastest growing markets where software is demanded. And a lot of this software is not just software that is new. Like, I know we're all about AI and AI application. A lot of the software is also software that needs to replace the software they're already buying. A very telling finding, which, by the way, tallied with my instincts with what Amar was talking about with the report, right, is that 80% of software bought in India is actually from global majors. And it always surprises me that foreign entrepreneurs realize what we don't, what we refuse to, right? Imagine we sending 25, 28, 30-year-old, 35-year-olds who've never been to America, sending them to America. They're renting a place in some corner of Bay Area, paying themselves crazy money, pulling and pushing for an O1 without any network, right? And foreign companies are saying, a great way to grow for us is to go to India, right? I can count on, I can count the number of companies who've gone outside India and achieved 50 million ARR, right? But actually, the number of companies that have gone outside India to America and have achieved 50 million ARR is actually smaller than American companies who've come to India and have done more than 50 million ARR. Right? And that is, to me, it's always been obvious and it's always been stupid, right? Now, here's the thing. Does India not have companies that buy software? Well, I'll tell you, right? I had more than a dozen customers in my previous company who paid more than $1 million a year, right? In India, Indian companies paying more than $1 million, 8.5 crores, right? A year, recurring. You know what that is like? Recurring revenue is amazing, right? SaaS is an amazing business model. Except the big problem with SaaS as a business model has been, and those of you who know your numbers should actually go to and look at the numbers of what customer acquisition costs and sales and marketing spends in America are like, right? Everybody wants to go to America, yes. And everybody wants to be in America, yes. It's also the most competitive software market in the world. So unless you have a very distinct distribution advantage, network advantage, homegrown advantage, you go to America to try to sell software, you will get rolled over bad, right? And, one of the general things that I learned back in college was that don't try to learn how to make money by looking at lottery winners, right? Right? And given the count of software companies that India has generated and given the numbers that have gotten beyond 50 million in America, it certainly feels like the same probability as a lottery winners, right? Less than 2 dozen companies, over hundreds, thousands of companies being generated feels a little, iffy, right? Now, 20 billion is the software market in the country. By the way, most of this market is actually owned by large software majors. I mean, it's stunning to me that Salesforce does $1 billion of revenue in India, right? So again, to me, very straightforward. To me, no GTM or go-to-market plan around SaaS or, the new wave of AI. AI software is going to be not that different from SaaS is my point of view, right? It's going to be sold somewhat differently, maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit more automatically, maybe a little bit more PLG driven, maybe the unit sizes will be smaller, maybe the outcome and pricing metrics will be different. But the general motion of, going and creating higher productivity and higher input for somebody is going to be generally the same, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, all right, today it doesn't make, my playbook is pretty much straightforward, right? Put a high quality team together in India. Have your global standards, right? Now there are a few easy low hanging fruits that you can beat, right? One of the best ways to beat, to get in your initial couple of $1 million in revenue is to build a high quality alternative to a global dominating SaaS player, right? That almost always works. Here's the thing. In India, your cost of building softwares are lower, but price that Indian customers pay is benchmarked to the US alternative, right? So if you are selling a Salesforce alternative, hard to build, sure, but possible, right? The benchmark will be what Salesforce charges, right? And that could be $100, $120, $130 per user, right? And again, there is a whole thing there how to price for India. Indian pricing needs to be a little bit more value conscious and so on and so forth, because in US, if somebody is getting an average salary of $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, paying $110 per user is not high. But in India, with $2,000, $3,000 monthly salary, right, $100 will, as a proportion, is high, right? Priced differently. But the point is, people will pay America type prices for India type product or input costs.
Provide the quality is good, right?
Yeah. Now, again, you need to make sure that you build it to global standards, right? And that's what people get wrong, right? And a lot of people also say, oh, if you build for India, your quality won't be high and all of that. I don't really believe that. If you look at Indian digital natives, right? If you go to any big Indian company and you try to sell them software, they're not going to compromise on their outputs because they're, the scope there is very high, right? They're not going to say that I'm going to buy this because it's Indian. They're going to buy this because it really does what the job to be done is the same. The quality and the output is the same, right? And by the way, Indian software companies routinely produce high quality software, right? As a matter of fact, most of the American software that you buy was written right here in India. Where do you think Salesforce gets engineered, right? I assure you it's not in that shining tower in San Francisco. A lot of it gets done right here. So Microsoft. So again, you do that, and then I like what is called the layered GTM approach, where you're gonna raise your seed based on the team and the product and the idea. You're gonna raise your Series A on your initial product market fit, right? I believe a lot of the product market fit that you get in India, right? A lot of that is transportable, right? A lot of that is actually implementable in US as well. There are gonna be tweaks, tunes, and so on and so forth. PMF is always market specific. So once you do your PMF work in India, you're gonna have to redo it again in US. But it's gonna be easier to do your PMF work in the US once you've done that in India, right? Because once you have PMF, you're able to raise your second round. Right? Now, here's the thing. Now comes the question of by the time you get to PMF and you have done your founder, by the PMF, the founders are no longer selling. You got to put together a GTM team, right? This is the most expensive thing your company will ever buy, right? Sales capacity or GTM engine, right? The GTM engine is going to be the most expensive thing that you invest in, right? And America is almost 5 to 6x more expensive than India. Right now, 10 years ago, it was very hard to find people who could sell software and who could go to market, who could market, and so on and so forth. Not anymore, right? We have massive alumni, right? Of people who work and who scaled software, who can sell software, right? India has also 3 cities, right? All the software sold is in 3 cities, right? Bangalore, Bombay, and Delhi. If you have representation in 3 cities, right? And if you can afford cab fare in 3 cities, you can essentially, target almost all of this 20 billion in purchases, right? Chennai is the smallest. But if you're in Bangalore, you can sell to Chennai. The third one is once you scale your GTM and PMF in India, you have PMF in Indosphere. What is Indosphere? Singapore. I'm not going to say countries, right? But as a city, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, and then there is Dubai and Riyadh, right? Maybe even Istanbul, right? And by the time you cover this, you already doubled your software market, right? It's $40-50 billion market. There are big customers, they're big buyers, digital natives, governments, right? Cloud availability and so on and so forth. So when you go to market in India, you go to market in the Indosphere. The Indosphere is where, by the way, it's not just that they buy software from India, it's Indians buying software from India mostly. Right? Remember, people buy from people, right? That's the whole thing, right? And now, by the time you get to your somewhere between your 1 to 5 million in ARR in India, right? That is when you start to scale and slowly start seeking your PMF in the large markets, right? US, probably Europe, right? And run that on the back. Now, what happens is people front run the US and back run India. So India gets ignored, right? And remember now, this is also about probabilities, right? In US, one failed GTM is $5-6 million. You failed, it didn't work, it's $5-6 million down the drain, right? You're gonna burn 2.5-3 million in easy. Sure, you could burn less, but by the time you're done with 1 or 2 years of that, you will quit the business, which is why you see a lot of these Indian-made SaaS companies who go to US 2 years, founder says can't do it anymore, shuts down, starts the next startup, right? Because it's just exhausting to be able to do that, right? Now, I believe that India's market advantage is a SaaS ladder to success, right? There are very few categories that India has a TAM which is smaller than $100 to $50 million. Take any target category. Cybersecurity is massive, right? Cybersecurity is also almost, by the way, there are no good Indian cybersecurity providers. It's ironic to me that there's a company in India that buys Sentinel-1, right? It's absurdly expensive, right? Now, you could say, oh, we can't engineer Sentinel in India. Well, I call bullshit on that, right? You can. There's very little in software that we can't do. We are world-class in making software, right? So India is a brownfield market for anybody who decides to compete in a large enough category, right? So my playbook is very straightforward. Create a high-quality team, go to market in India, find your PMF, raise your next round, front-run the India GTM, back-run it with the US GTM. So what you learn in India, you apply in the US and you scale. There are going to be different markets, different motions, right? But don't start in the US, right? If you do that, one is you have massive US networks, or somebody has written you a $10 million seed check or a $5 million seed check. In that case, by all means, right? But if you don't have,
probably have a co-founder base there, right?
yeah, you have a co-founder base there, and that's expensive, right? By the way, by the time you say a co-founder there, that's a $250K minimum expense, right?
Yeah.
That's a $250K minimum expense. Your founder can't take a salary cut, they get deported, right? So you're gonna have to pay them full market salary when you send them to the US. And then, by the way, I'm not even talking, it's gonna cost to travel, all of that. US is just a more expensive market. It's an extremely expensive place, which, by the way, is also the reason why all the SaaS companies, very few are actually profitable, right? They're spending massive sales and marketing to get this. So my point is very simple. The Indian market advantage is a ladder to SaaS success. You can be more efficient. You have more chances to fail. And anybody who thinks they're going to build their software in the first shot, right? Look, I know you can't see my gray hair from here, but trust me, there are plenty there, right? We're not going to build. You're not going to get PMF in first shot, right? There are people who do, and good for them. I wish someday that lottery will happen to me, but you're going to fail once or twice, right? Not fail twice in the US, right? So
thanks, Kuldeep. I think if that doesn't convince the audience to shift to the Indian market, I don't know what will. I know in the interest of time, quickly, Avinash, this year, SaaSBoomi had its first ever dedicated India market tracks, right? I think clearly, the ecosystem is also setting up and taking notice that there is a massive opportunity, untapped opportunity in the India market, right? So from a next 10 years point of view, right? How do you think the ecosystem evolving to shine the spotlight a bit more and support the founders that are building for the domestic market? Any thoughts?
Sure. Hey, thank you, Gowri, for having me. And I would like to thank Kuldeep. As you can see, he's so passionate about the India market, lot of insights. It was a couple of meetings where I met Kuldeep, where he convinced, as SaaSBoomi, you should be focusing on the India market. So thank you, Kuldeep. We are here. Thanks to you that we launched the report. Thanks to Gowri, who actually helped in weaving this together. We found an amazing partner with the Amar, and the whole report came out. So let me tell you what we've been up to after the report. And, report is probably one part of it, but there is a lot of work which needs to be done after the report itself. And we were actually gearing up for some of the things. See, one thing which we've not really done as a country is to celebrate some of these companies who built for the India market, scaled itself in this market, and then moved to other markets. So basically showcasing the India first case studies is something which we want to do. The companies that you talked about, the CleverTap, MoEngage, WebEngage, there is GreyTip over there, Grey HR, there is Keka, there is Darwinbox. A lot of these companies need to be celebrated as their first market was India, and that's how they built the entire thing. If you look at it, we've also evangelized this sell to India GTM playbook itself. We've not done too many of them, but there are enough playbooks out there which we have to make it available for other founders itself. So that's something which we would be focusing on. The third is basically building a lot of channels and partnership opportunities itself, partnering with the Indian IT services itself who are looking for innovative products. Is there a channel that we can build where all of this comes together? Indian IT services, which has that direct connect with these companies, can they look at some of these companies and partner and build their own value prop more visible for these companies itself? That's some of the things. What we've done in the last couple of years is also build this India First Domestic Awards itself, recognizing companies which are actually doing well. That's also a good way to, sort of uplift the work being done by the companies. I remember in iSpirit, we did a lot of work, especially to build the domestic market itself. So we built playbooks where companies, we did it largely for the SMB market itself, companies which have got access to the market and how they build the market itself. So that was something which was evangelized. In fact, Tally was a big supporter in that movement itself. And then gradually we got other companies itself. So one of the things that we've been doing is this thing called Enterprise Connect or the CIO Connect itself, where buyers are coming and looking at companies which are building for the domestic market itself. It becomes a platform where there is a good exchange which happens and hopefully some trade happens after that. One of the last and the most important thing is the evangelizing with the government. If the government can also incentivize, do something for companies which are made for India, or the folks who are actually building for India. A lot of problems need to be solved by software, and there are companies which are solving them. But the government can also play a little bit of influential role itself. Some bit of incentivizing, giving, and all that can happen. We've not really taken that path as of now, but we feel there is merit in doing something that. And some of these early adopters, the buyers, need to be also highlighted. See, a lot of times the companies get showcased, but someone who's risking at that software, buying that software, and all that is also something which needs to be highlighted. There are many such stories, but yeah, those are some points that I thought would be useful for the audience as well.
No, thanks, Avinash. I think clearly the momentum is picking up, and there's a lot more to be done as an ecosystem to help founders capitalize on this opportunity, right? So we have a bunch of questions. I know we have 7-8 minutes left. We're probably going to pick 3 questions, answer them. For the others, folks, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn or other social media, and then we'll try to get your questions answered, right? The first question is, in which sectors do you see India SaaS to be fragmented, and where can it be winner take all or opportunity for founders? Anyone?
Well, I think the first few categories of SaaS are the only ones that have consolidated, right? I wouldn't recommend you build a Salesforce alternative today. That's a tough call. It requires a lot of money, right? But for everything else, I think there is a massive opportunity, right? Again, look, software itself, SaaS itself will change, fundamentally shift, right? I mean, for example, like for every Salesforce, there are solutions like ATO, right? Which are basically saying that, hey, does the mid-market and low-end SMB require the complete full-stack enterprise stack like Salesforce does, right? So there is going to be those opportunities in the shadow, large oaks, right? So there is fragmentation. I believe infra, right? Especially cloud infra software, right? There is a lot of opportunity. DevTools is one of the largest categories of software. Massive opportunity. Similarly, I think vertical SMB vertical is, right? Mindbody, a lot of people don't realize, right? Mindbody, which helps people manage yoga studios and exercise studios and gyms in US, is a $500 billion revenue vertical software company, right? Just as one thing, right? Casper, there's so many other verticals. So, like, India has done some paid pujas. Fantastic example, right? I mean, they've scaled, and by the way, as the market organizes, people like this will become more and more important. So vertical SMB, I think, is an important thing. Winner take all is just the name of the game when it comes to SaaS. Eventually, just 1 or 2 players remain, right? Marketing automation is another interesting category where right now there are 3 players and they're going to fight among themselves, right? Maybe 5, but there are 3 domestic, very, very strong market, right? 200 million of revenue between 3 players, right? and still growing. So there is that fantastic advantage. Again, when it comes to SaaS, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is almost completely imported. The next 10 years, we will see almost all big cybersecurity vendors come from India, right? I mean, almost all our purchase is going to be in India. Already, by the way, a lot of the payment companies, a lot of fintechs have to provide an SAR, right? Which is a data localization certificate that they have to provide that by data in our servers and applications hosted within India, right? It's already making it very difficult. So you pick any category, right? Infra, middlewares, they're all fragmented in India right now because most of the supply is coming from abroad, right? Eventually, if you take a few categories where there is some motion in terms of where there are advantages of having that software being hosted out of India, I think that's all where an Indian player will dominate. Marketing tech, marketing automation is a great example. Most marketing tech in India is from India, right? That's one category of software where you can say that we import less than we to say about that, but that I think is a great example. Similar for every other SaaS category.
I think second question. Yeah, I guess question. I think bulk of it, Kuldeep has anyway covered, and I completely agree that efficient markets are those where concentration is higher and there are fewer players. So eventually, given it's SaaS, but then certain industries which are different, or let's say SMBs, and within that verticals, we also observe that there will be need for more customized software. Let's say supply chain software, and that's different for different kind of industries. What you may build for infrastructure industries, supply chain, versus what you'll need for.
That's a good catch, Amar, by the way. The transport management software is also another category where more software is bought from India than outside India.
Right.
Famous players and very big names, people doing 40, 50 million. They don't even get talked about, but there are more than a few companies doing more than 100 crores in recurring in TMS, right? They sell to big foreign majors, but supply chain, transport management software.
So there'll be, logistic, for instance, the intercity versus intracity, the first mile, mid mile, last mile. These are different problems. And perhaps, I don't know, if one company can solve them, there could be different approaches to solving. So there may be fragmentation in these kind of spaces, but ultimately, by and large, as Kuldeep said, I mean, it should be more consolidation. And
what I say, Amar, is that in India, if you build a 100 crore recurring revenue company, right, the multiple markets will give you, right? It's right? Yeah. You can make massive profits at that level of revenue, and 100 crores is not that hard to achieve in software.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Moving to the second question in the interest of time, I think for the 5G unlocks, isn't this moving into services territory? Is that VC backable? So I'm going to give one perspective on this, and Kuldeep, Amar, and Avinash, feel free to chime in. Right. What we learned during our study is that having component of services is almost critical in India to have the lock-in. Right, and people who had the services component had a higher attention than people who did not have the services component. Right, partly because services is critical to get compress the time to value, and almost you need to keep educating the customer on the value that your software is providing on a regular basis. Right, and services is a great way to achieve it. Is that VC backable? I think again from a VC perspective, folks, with AI coming in, what is services, what is product, the boundary completely blurred, right? What we understood in the old SaaS model with full recurring with 90% growth margin is probably now morphing because we are putting the product and the labor together and evaluating this. So I wouldn't worry about it too much from the VC backable point of view, right? Because the whole SaaS and the agentic business model is evolving.
What is VC backable is a terrible question to ask before you start a business. What is VC backable? What do you tell the VC is backable? Come on, I mean services.
That's founder speak.
Every time you go into talk to a VC, somebody will tell you what will work and what doesn't. That's all right. My recommendation is don't listen to VCs. Most good companies, successful companies are built with a very strong focus on where can you create value. Anywhere where you can go from 1 to 100, right, is VC backable. That's what VC is, right? They're saying it's high risk capital chasing very big dreams. If there is a big dream, on services, by the way, a lot of people think that services business charge for service. Services can be, as Gowri said, right, a way for you to hold on to your customers. you'll be surprised that almost all the customers that we replace in India, right? We take one of the largest categories, right? So if you're using Datadog and New Relic, we'll displace it for you, lower your cost by 30%. And by the way, you can talk to a human being. American customers love that they can talk to a person, right? They love the fact that we'll, like it or not, right? When you start eliminating humans from the loop, eventually humans in the loop will become a USP, right? And the funny enough thing is humans are not that expensive. Software is always more expensive than humans. It's compressed, right? Yeah. So it's one of those things. Don't worry. I mean, I hate when people call it, oh, this is more white gloved, service led. It's software. You got to deliver an outcome for your customer. How you do it and the margin you make doing it are the only two factors. Right? If you're spending $1 to generate $6 or $5 for customer will give you $3 of that. Right? Almost always. Right? Almost always. And $3 is 66% gross margin business. Go out in the market and look at how many people generate that level of margin. You'll be surprised that, they're all VC backed.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, I think we are out of time. Folks, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know, apologies, we've not been able to answer all the questions. We will try to probably do a follow-up session where we take these questions. Thank you, Avinash, Kuldeep, and Amar for taking the time out, right? To end this with a VC perspective, at Antler India, we are super bullish about the domestic software market opportunity. So if you are building something interesting in this space, you're more than welcome to apply on the Antler website. So it's antler.co/apply. Feel free to apply, and we will take it seriously and get back to you within a short time. And second, if you're also evaluating, hey, what are some of the ideas that you want to build? There's a next 100 list of ideas that have come out from industry stakeholders, operators, founders, and stuff. You can check that out as well. Avinash, over to you.
Yeah, I was just saying, if there are unanswered questions, if we can get it, happy to respond to wherever we can. It'll just be good for folks to get some response instead of not getting any response. If at all possible.
I'll be able to, we can also answer on Twitter. So just, bring this on Twitter. Twitter is a great place for this.
Yeah.
So just do that.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll calculate the question, probably do a blog post with the answers to some of these. Thank you so much, folks. I look forward to interacting with you again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And all the best.